Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Atlantic Bushcraft Adventures. Tonight we're on episode 319, and we're going to talk a little bit about packable fishing kits. So a tiny lead in, once again, Ben's idea, full credit to him. He posed a question to me. What do you think should be in a good packable fishing kit? And we got to talking about it, and well, anyway, kind of led to this episode. So why don't you start us off where you started off with me, Ben, and then let's just discuss it in general, and we'll have this open conversation. We got Eric joining us already, and hopefully some others join in, and maybe they'll weigh in on it too.
Yeah, I guess there's a little bit more background that I can share before we get too far into it. Me and Robert have tried fishing in the past, and we did test, what we could do with the least amount of gear. And we did decide definitively one of us is a better fisherman than the other. And we'll never say who, but and anyways, but it got me thinking again, because recently I've been on YouTube and different social medias, and this Tenkara, I think that's how it's pronounced, Japanese fishing rod came up, and all it is an extendable pole. You tie a fishing line to the end, and you fish with that. It seems like generally the line is not much longer than the rod. You can flick it out, and I'm like, that is an awfully compact, minimalist kit. And I think we both just pulled out what our current minimalist kit is, and so yeah, these little ultra thick, small. But the problem is the reel, in my opinion.
And I agree.
This thing, this one I've had since, I don't know, I was probably 19 when I bought this rod or reel, and it's transferred to different rods over the years. It was a good one when I bought it, but it's starting to show age and stuff. And when I go to replace it, I'm always shocked at the price of a good reel. Yeah. And you can buy cheap reels. Like there's $10, $15, $20 reels out there. And honestly, after using them for a few hours, you understand fully why they were $10, $15, $20. They don't feel right. They act up. They
feel gritty. It's the only way to explain it. Like when you're reeling, it feels like there's somebody took a handful of sand and put inside it.
Yeah, and sometimes the thing, like I've had handles come off on me. I've had the line just disconnect somehow. This one, the whole spool, like I guess you could buy different spools and have different setups. It's fully pop. The good ones are good, the bad ones are bad, and the medium ones are probably okay. But then I got to thinking, like, with this takes up room in my pack. This is a vulnerable piece. And if it fails, I kind of feel like I can't fish anymore. And so when I thought about our camping trip, our challenge was to do, I think we were allowed one hook, one fishing line, and that was it. And so we made some hand reel type things. It's basically a stick with the line tied to the end, or a stick we could wind it around and just toss it out into the water. And we were able to pull out a few trout on that. We had a feed, not a great feed, but we had a feed of trout that night, and it was an enjoyable trip. And I got to thinking, like, what if I was doing like a long hike or just taking a day trip, and I wanted a lightweight kit in case I seen a stream and something I was really tempted to fish in, or a nice pond or whatever. What do I need? And so that's the question we're at now. So there's the history. This is where we came from.
And this is kind of where our conversation picked up.
Yeah, this is where the debates and the conversations start. And so I think the best place to start is a place we're all going to have to agree on is what goes on the end of our line. Because that doesn't matter, and everything else matters nothing, way less than what you have at the end of your line. What is the fish going to bite, and how am I going to keep that fish on that to get him out of the water?
So Eric's got a question there. Have you guys ever tried hand fishing? And I'm going to state a question onto this. By hand fishing, do you mean like having the line in your hand and tossing it out, or do you mean like noodling, where you kind of stick your arm under the riverbank, grab onto the fish, and pull them out? Because if you're talking about noodling, or what I've always called it as is noodling, like with catfish, we don't really have those kind of fish here. I've never done it anyway. I know people that have done it with eels, but I don't know where we get catfish big enough here to do that. I've never seen it. Maybe we do. Maybe, that's a question for Gary, I guess.
Yeah, Gary know a lot more. But no, I do not. The closest I've came to what you could call hand fishing is there was a pond near my cabin growing up, and in the fall, by the fall, the pond dried up, and there was a puddle left full of trout, and we would go down and pick them up by the hand and scoop them into buckets. And the majority of them we just put into the lake. We may have kept a few for food, but honestly, by that point, it was questionable whether they were really great.
Probably getting a little seedy out in those puddles, and I guess
getting a little
earthy.
Yeah. But yeah, that's about the closest I could say I was hand fishing. I've also tried catching them while swimming, but surprisingly, shockingly, fish are better swimmers than I am, and generally can swim and slip out of my hands.
I was going to say, the closest I've ever gotten is a little spear fishing, and that's it. And I had minimal luck with that.
So back to the end. I know that you have to follow the law. In some places, you can't use a barbed hook. I think a barbed hook, though, does greatly increase your chances of maintaining a fish on the line. And if you're hunting for food, I personally have no objections to a barbed hook. If you're doing catch and release, I fully understand barbless hooks. I also believe that even with a barbless hook and trying your best, you're occasionally going to kill some of those fish. They're not, it's not good for the fish to be caught.
No. And a prime example of this is I just took Lily fishing. Well, you should be in bed first and foremost. So I just seen walk by the door. I had her out fishing yesterday. And we were just at a little public park and they had fish and we were fishing with barbless hooks. And it was just kind of catch and release. But we still ended up keeping 3 fish to eat because they were just hooked too bad. You know what I mean? Sometimes the fish swallows it a little too deep and there's no real safe way of getting it out of them.
Yeah. So I have definitely killed fish that I would have loved to have let go, but just that happens. Like sometimes the hook goes into like an eye or you rip out part of their mouth just because of the way you jig it when it bites, like you give it that little set. And if it's a smaller fish than you expect, it may not have the density, the strength to handle that. I've also watched an uncle who used to fish, and I swear to God, he broke every one of their necks before they made it out of the... He would flip them back, and then he would snap them. And I remember there was a puddle behind him. It was just full of small trout with their necks broken. So I'm not that good. But anyways, yeah, so... a trick that I learned from a fellow fisherman, and not Gary, surprisingly enough, is bigger hooks do not necessarily mean more fish or bigger fish.
No, and I've often found for here, nice little, I always call them trout hooks. I don't know what they're actually called now. I guess little egg hooks or whatever they are, just nice small little hooks tend to be the better option for a lot of the places around here. Because we have a lot of brook trout, right, folks? A massive fish in Nova Scotia, 3 pounds? You know what I mean? That's a good sized fish. I don't think I've ever caught a fish bigger than 3 pounds here. I've heard them, but I don't think I've ever caught one.
No, the straight bass look pretty big, man.
I was going to say, out of the brooks and stuff. Yeah, out of the ocean and some of those other places, you can get bass. They're pretty big. But I mean, like brook trout, they're all pretty small.
Yeah. Yeah, so, I mean, there's definitely something there. But apparently, like he said, and I've tried it, it does seem to be, I did have good success with it. Using a nice small hook, the small fish can bite it and the big fish can bite it. And once it hooks in, it hooks in. So you have a pretty good chance. The only thing is, I guess, really strong fish will potentially cut your line or break your line. So that's where another important piece comes in. A lead. These metal leads, you will learn as you fish. For some fish are almost essential. For other fish are the death. You will not catch fish with these sometimes. So certain fish, you need something that they can't cut through. I did learn from my friend Gary that a heavier line for a couple of inches or feet, maybe a foot, is really good if you're trying to get those, what are they called? Not the pike, but similar to a pike.
Pickerel?
Pickerel. The pickerel, because they're snappy, snarly, sharp-toothed thing.
Yeah, very sharp teeth, scaly.
So you might be fishing with 10, 15-pound line, but you want like 30-pound line for a couple of inches.
For a leader, yeah.
Yeah, as a leader. But apparently some of them can pick up on the metal leader and they will avoid it. So it's worth playing with, but having a couple of short lengths of heavier, denser line to help protect you, or a good leader. Also, depending on the fish and the terrain, like if you have a lot of things to snag up on, sometimes that'll help protect it because the hook is what tends to drag a bit. So I'm a fairly big fan of a good lead or two. So I thought I'd mention that.
Yeah, I generally make. I do have some steel leaders in there, but much like you said, I have some. And you're gonna laugh at me when you hear how heavy this is. This is like 50-pound test or something like that, and I end up making leaders out of it because I just bought a spool of it from a yard sale or something like that. And I mean, even a little old, it's probably still good enough for the brook trout I'm catching.
Yeah. But that's a neat little trick. When it comes to what goes between your leader and your hook, or what could be attached to your hook, is your lure, your spinner, your fly. I just happen to have some flies here. This is just a little pack that came with a rod I got for Christmas, I think, or my birthday, one of the two. You know, flies. I've often liked flies, and a trick I've used. Somebody might tell me that's illegal, and if it is, I didn't do it in that location. Is if you have a spinner on your line, go up about 2-3 feet, and then tie about a foot of line off of it, and put a fly on the end of that. And as you cast out and bring it back, you can sometimes catch fish on the fly or the spinner, or maybe both at the same time. It's been known to happen. So it's if you're not sure what they're going to do, or if it's the fishing is really interesting, you can sometimes try that. We had some good success on some lakes I used to fish in my youth, many moons ago.
So I got a question for you, seeing we're on to this topic. Are you fly or bait kind of guy? Like, I understand we're probably going to have both, but what's your preferred go-to if you're just trying to drop a line in?
If I'm hoping for food, bait.
Bait? Okay.
Like flies is an art to me. Like I love the idea of fly fishing. I'm trying to get back into it. I have 2 rods now, and I'll probably go. Someone will eventually see me standing on some field in a most weird spot.
We're into cast again.
Trying to relearn how to cast. I'll probably have like a handkerchief out like 15, 20 feet away from me, probably a bit more than that, but a ways across the field trying to pick the handkerchief up. Because that's a good practice, learning to put your line where you want it. It is a really, it's a great art. And if you're good at it and you can get that fly in the right swirl on the current, you can sometimes pull some amazing trout, or salmon or things like that. And it is fun. It's also real easy to overshoot and bash your hook against the rocks or something behind you. Getting that nice roll so you can just flick it out another 4 or 5 feet. That's a really fun one too. But no, just a pretty simple spinner with a worm. I use artificial bait on occasion. I think I got some stuff here. That's a pretty minor kit. This one here, I think, was loaded up. So you got some rubber, fish. You got some roe things in here. I've used, I had actually pretty good success with berries.
Yeah, I was gonna say red berries usually work pretty good.
I've used blueberries, crackleberries. I call them crackleberries. Correct me if I'm wrong on this one. They're like a bright orange berry, usually in like sets of 3, a small leaf.
Oh, I know the ones you're talking about. Leave it with me. I'll come up with the name.
I'm not even sure how edible they are. I've never eaten one. I have fished with them. Grubs. If you flick a couple of rocks over, sometimes you find worms and stuff, but sometimes you find like the beetle larvae, the big white grubs. They're really good for fish or chickens. Depending on what you're fishing for, right? But yeah, so those are some of the things that, again, if this is part of, say, your survival kit, if you're in a tournament and it says you can't use bait, then you can't use bait. If you're in a place where the law says no bait, then you can't use bait. If there's nothing, I have put, somebody will probably get so mad at me for this one, I have put a little bit of worm on my flies before just to see if I can make them more attractive.
Did it work? Just out of curiosity?
I caught fish. I don't know if it made. You have no idea, right?
Fair
It's all
enough.
trial and error. And what you
Okay,
think.
so we talked about what's going on in the end, a little bit in between. Let's get back to the brass tacks of this. What do you need for a rod? We both have these collapsible ones. We've both mentioned that the failure of this is kind of the reel. It takes up a water room and it's sensitive, quote unquote, comparatively to other things. You know what I mean? So this is where our conversation kind of started right before the podcast. So let me take it back to you. Is a reel even necessary for where you are fishing? Because a lot of times, and this is what we were talking about, it's you just want to fish out of opportunity. If you're going to fish, you're going to take fishing gear. You know what I mean? Or generally, you're going to take fishing gear. But more often than not, if you're bushcrafting, you just happen to be walking through the woods and you're like, man, I wish I had a line to put right here, right now. How far away is that right here, right now spot? Because in my general experience, I'm never going more than 10, 15 feet. Like, I just happen to be walking by and it's like, this is the most perfect place ever. Maybe up to 20. You know what I mean? But that's about it.
So that's what I said. When I come to think of it, oftentimes by the time I snag my foot fish, it is actually usually a lot closer to me than where I cast it out. So I think patience and choosing your spot well matters a lot here. But I kind of agree with you. Probably not much more than 30, 40 feet is really necessary. And when we were fishing in that little stream, we just cut some wood, something that could hold our fishing line and allow us to like play with it a bit. If you caught like, I don't know, if you were in the woods and found like a bamboo fishing type thing, that would be great. But I'm thinking even like a willow branch, like, 8 feet, probably not go to its finest tip because that's gonna break. But come back, something a little bit sturdier, you can pull a good fish out with that. It's a different action. You can't reel, so you have to really play with it. You wouldn't want too much line, probably not more than the same length of your rod, or maybe that and 50% more even.
Because basically you have to pick it up and swing it back to you, because especially if you're fishing barbless, and if nobody's fished barbless before, you got to keep constant pressure on that line, because the second you let pressure off, that fish has a chance to dislodge that hook. The barb will usually let it stick in, but as we've said, barbed hooks generally injure the fish more. So barbless is nicer, but you got to keep that pressure on it, and that's one of the downsides to not having a reel.
I have a cousin, when I used to grow up and we used to fish, and he caught some amazing fish out of some lakes. I don't know if he knew how to use the reel. I really don't, because as soon as he caught a fish, he ran. He grabbed that fish around and he ran. He would run up the hill right into the woods, and you look and there's the fish bouncing across the beach.
But I mean, that's a valid way to get it in if you don't have a reel. You know what I mean? Just walk backwards.
Yeah.
Actually, Steve, that's what started this whole conversation, was that Takira fishing rod. That's what we started with. That's what Ben was looking at, in all honesty. And some other comments here from the side, just before we glaze over them. Somebody caught a fish on a cigarette butt, and that was Red Bear Tactical. He said he heard a story about it, and then Steve backed it up, saying he's seen his dad catch a trout in a cigarette butt, so he can confirm. And then Red Bear was talking about those gimmick pen rods in a survival bag. Looks like a joke, but I've caught fish on it. And I have one of those too, and it does work. But you're right. The biggest weakness of that one is it's super short, and the reel is terrible. But it is a reel. You know what I mean? And looping all the way back to Eric's question, have we ever hand fished with a line? That's the trip that we were talking about previous. We did hand spools, and you literally just cast out with your hand, and it's literally like... a can or a bottle or something like this, and you're just wrapping over here, and you just wrap the line kind of over the end as it goes on. We have done that, yes, and Ben's caught fish that way. Can confirm.
Yeah. I have fed 2 men for that one. So the 10 karat rods, that really interests me. I've never owned one, but I can understand the concept, and I've kind of, like, by accident, like playing with branches and stuff, done similar things. Because I spent a lot of time growing up on rivers and streams and doing fishing and stuff that, makes it really fun. I'm thinking, a handful of decent hooks, maybe a couple of flies, a couple of leads, and probably really don't need much more than 50 feet of line. That gives you enough for, actually, you could bust a couple of times and still be fine, right?
And that's the thing. I'm going to make the argument, and maybe people will argue with me. I don't even think
Hopefully.
a reel is necessary. A good, and if anybody's wondering, these Tinkira lines, Tinkira, there is a brand named Tinkira, but it's basically just a stick with a string on it. That's Tinkira in a nutshell.
Yeah, and we're not saying go to the, because there's an expensive one. It's like $200 a rod. But
Yeah,
I've also found, and I found some YouTube videos talking about it. You can also get pretty cheap ones like 20, 30, 50, $60 on Amazon, AliExpress, or Temu. And some of them got some decent reviews, both online, on YouTube and stuff. So it's worth shopping around if if you want to spend more because you really like the quality or the look or the fact that it's a few grams lighter or whatever, like that's fine. Like you're spending on your hobby, and if it's something you love, obviously do what you want to do. We're not going to judge you because then you can judge us, and there's way too much judgment we are exposed to.
he who lives in a glass house does not throw the first stone, right? So,
No, we do not, right? Yeah, do what you want with your money. But it's a concept that I really want to like. I don't need another rod. Like, do not get me wrong. Like, just understand I have enough stuff. But it was something interesting. I thought it was worth bringing up to our viewers, our listeners, and say, listen, like, if you're going out, if you're making a trip, and you're what do you need? Because honestly, we're often saying like bulk is the killer for our camping trips. Stuff that takes up room. And so I do bike trips. I have my SUV. I have like a little inflatable canoe in the back right now that travels with me every time I take it. I'm excited to get it out some more. I haven't had a chance in the last few weeks, but I'm excited to get it back out. And I was kind of thinking, like, I can fish for this thing. And one of my last canoe trips, now it was on a Boro canoe, but we happened to be in a campsite and there was a stick with some rope on it and a hook. And I grabbed some berries or something, or maybe a cheese. I stole some food from somewhere. Maybe it was pepperettes. I know we've done that too. But just tossed it behind me, didn't bother like reeling or anything, and just slowly paddled across a channel. And I hooked a fairly big bass. I'm pretty sure it was a bass, and I had it in the boat. It flipped out just as it came over the edge, like it flipped around, and I lost it. I wasn't going to eat it anyway, so it seemed fine. And then I tried again. I caught another decent one, and it's like I'm probably not going to catch another one anyway, so I definitely let that go. So I wasn't out trying to catch anything, but it was a good trip, and I was excited to be out there. And it was also kind of exciting to just catch something. You know what I mean?
yeah, no, 100%. I'm just answering some stuff in the comments there. I'm not
Yeah.
not ignoring you.
But yeah, I think that the whole point here is that you probably we're not saying you don't need or you should not buy a reel and that there's not a place for it, because honestly there is, and I have a bunch, so I can't say it isn't. But a good fishing rod is a lot of fun. But honestly, when you're out for a little stroll and you come across a small pond or a brook or an interesting eddy in a river or something, yeah, oftentimes I'm pretty sure a stick that can extend out 8, 16 feet, and this is where these tincaras seem to fall, and a similar length of a rope, that's going to let you get probably across a lot of streams.
Yeah, and that's the thing. That's what I said. My new argument is, do you really need a reel? And I guess like for the people that want a reel, here's a couple things. Like with mine, I take the handle off it. It makes it a little bit more linear. It's one less thing to stick out, get tied into things. I put this in a different pocket, but that now means I got to put my handle on every time. The only reason I remove the handle from this one is because it is not a through bearing, much like Ben's would be. If he takes his handle off, the whole thing's going to come apart in two ends, and there's a whole bunch of little washers and crap in between. This one, super cheap reel, specifically bought because all it is, threaded hole with a threaded end. Nothing to lose in between. I bought it specifically for this purpose, but still,
It's only good for one hand.
yeah, pretty much.
I'm
There is no
left-handed.
forward, backwards. There is nothing on this. It is a right-handed reel only. I guess depending on how you fish. If you want to use it, see, I always fish like this. I keep my reel upside down, and believe it or not, I use the winder in my opposite hand. And I don't know if that's normal or not, but this one works great for that for me.
No, I generally especially open face underneath. I kind of remember with the closed faced, I tended to keep those up top.
Yeah, so did I. And this is the other thing I was going to throw at you for conversation. If you were to choose a reel for a portable fishing rod, would a closed face reel be a better option?
Yes. Controversial opinion, but closed fish reels tend to have fewer problems. They're not as good for long distance casts. I only have open face here right now, so don't
I have
think I'm
one
bashing.
closed face, and it's Lily's.
No, but, and I've said this has been said on the show before. You go to Walmart, Canadian Tire, I don't care what, go to the kids section of the fishing rods. There's these little 3-foot fishing rods with closed face reels. Dora, what's the Nemo, Finding Nemo, Barbie, they all have these. Those are.
They're not bad little rods and reels, are they, Ben? I know where you're getting at here.
They're lightweight, they're super tough, and I swear to God, I can get like 80% of the distance I can get with this rod over here. We have a bunch of them at the cabin for the girls because they're foolproof.
Yeah, they're easy to cast. You push the button, as long as you hold the button down, you just toss and go with the button. It's just timing, and it's going to cast. That's why I got one for Lily. One, she's young. Two, with that little bit of autism, I mean, the coordination can be a little bit mixed up. Those things are foolproof. Like, you can fish them. And here was my argument for the closed face reel, where you can cast those so easily with one hand. It's so easy to, like, move a limb, reach out, and just give it a flick with your wrist. There's something to say about a cheap closed face reel. You know what I mean? I'm with you. Unpopular opinion, I might get a small closed face reel to switch this over to.
Oh man, I'm telling you, go to. I'm telling you, if you can get one of those cheap fishing rods for just throwing in, like, I really am interested in the 10 carat, and I actually I have a 15-foot fiberglass pole I use for camera gear, and I've almost wondered now if I could just double that. Like, I have it anyways. I can reach it from here. I can. So this thing here, it's not got the action. Like, it's a pretty stiff pole, but this thing here, it's meant for my. It has some different lengths. I can get across the room with this thing.
So why couldn't you tie a line off to the end of that? Like, set yourself up a line where it's heavier on the end. Make yourself a quick connect loop on it. Get a little lead line in between with a small leader, and you could use that as a pole. Yes, it's stiff, but it would still get it out where you need it to be.
Way in the next room.
Yeah, I was going to say, so it's at least 10 feet, right?
It's 10, 12 foot.
Yeah.
But it's fairly thick. It weighs a bit, but I can put my fishing rod on it, or I can put a fishing reel. I could definitely tie a line to the end of it and get something at where I want. And it doesn't weigh a lot. So I could probably, just to experiment with, use something like this. And then it serves a dual purpose that I can put the 360 or the pocket camera I have on it, and I can get some neat shots with it that way too, right? So what are you looking to do with this thing? But
no, 100%. Yeah. And that's the thing. Like, we just wanted to get people thinking. We wanted some input. We wanted to get our thoughts out there. It was an interesting conversation to us. Hopefully it was an interesting conversation to you folks. And like I said, I'm now on team either no reel or Dora the Explorer closed-faced reel. Because it's just so easy to cast.
Oh, if I was if I was with Gary fishing, I swear I'd do this too. If I was competing with Gary in a fishing tournament, and I would never win, but at some point in the tournament, I would pull out the Dora the Explorer fishing rod and start honestly trying to beat him.
Because sad part is, like you said, they have really good actions in a lot. Well, not really good, but they're good for what you pay for. They cast okay. They don't ball up that bad. They're not bad.
No, I've had a lot of fun. And if you're trying to go through thicker brush, like you're trying to get a place you wouldn't get anywhere else, or even like in a canoe or a kayak where you don't have a lot of room to maneuver, sometimes that neat control, it's easy to cast with one hand. Like, it's super easy to cast with one hand. And I got some pretty good precision with it. Like, it's not a bad option. I think they're like $15, $20. They're not even expensive.
There might be less than that. I think they go on sale for like $12 and come with tackle.
They come with a small tackle box. Like, best deal out there. No.
And I guess the only other thing I might throw on for the person out there would be a bobber. But you can make them. We did do that. We made some wooden bobbers with varying success. But I mean, you can't beat a good, just dirt cheap plastic bobber to have in there. They are a little delicate. I suggest if you have the choice, splurge and buy the kind of styrofoamish ones. They don't crush.
Yeah.
They're just a little bit more durable. If you want to spend an extra couple bucks. If not, dollar store sells those red and white ones, and man, they work good.
So yeah, I mean, different fish require some different practices. Like if you're out there looking for catfish or things that are eating off the bottom, um, I mean, a bobber does help with that, but you want a weight sort of away from your hook. So you put the weight on the end and you come back a foot or two and you put your hook off of that and you just let it sit on the bottom and wait for your line to move. And then you know something picked up your bait. More aggressive hunter style fish, as I would like to describe them, they're looking for something that's swimming through the water. So if you're going after a pickerel or like a bigger fish like that,
Perch,
pike,
pike, any of those really aggressively hunting style
something
fish.
that resembles a small fish, a frog, a tadpole, even a mouse, or something like that. I have you can have some really good success. Those things do really well. And then some other fish, really something with a bit of bait, something with a bit of flavor to pull them in. And so it's really helpful to know your area. And so any advice we give you is probably limited to how we fished and where we fished and who taught us. A better fisherman than me or you combined would give way better advice. But for someone to have a bit of fun, nobody's going to beat our advice here. That probably all you need is a stick with a line on the end,
And that's what it's coming down to. Honestly, it comes down to the tackle and the line for me, because you can make a stick in the woods. Worst case scenario, you can make a stick, but you can't make the tackle. So if you got some decent line, some basic but good quality tackle, you can make yourself a fishing kit anywhere. You know what I mean? Flip some rocks, find some grubs, use some berries, something like that. Throw a couple little flies in with your tackle. That way, at the very minimum, you have ready to go bait.
I think you've seen me make a lure out of the wax on a baby bell.
And we tried a couple different things. We used the baby bell. We also used it might have been a beer bottle top or a pop bottle top. We kind of folded it into a spoon and made that into a spinner. We've tried some I don't want to say genius things. We've tried some out of the box things and have had success on some of it.
We've made some unique choices and found that it wasn't wrong.
I told you to take a pocket, the Drifting Spore fishing kit at Art at Night. I think it was the minimum required to catch fish. And yeah, Steve, the Drifting Spore, he did have some kits there at Art at Night. They're in Altoid skins, Altoid tins. And yeah, it was basically that. It was some fishing gear, some fishing line, a few other things in there, and that's basically all you need. You can literally pack it all into an Altoids tin, throw that in your pack, and cut yourself a switch or a cane or whatever you want to call it, tie a line onto the end of it, flick it out there, and you got yourself fishing. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Arguably, the hardest thing to find is going to be your bait, but that's just going to come with a little trial and error. Like, I've had luck on grasshoppers. I flipped rocks and found worms and grubs. Big juicy ants I've had varying success on, like the really big carpenter ants.
Flower petals, leaves.
Yeah, anything that's brightly colored and looks edible. Honestly, fish are not as picky as people think. They are lethargic sometimes, but there are like a lot of river fish are just opportunistic eaters. They're not really fussy. They're just either hungry or not.
Yeah. So they see something floating on the surface, a lot of them will bite to that. And it does matter like what mood they're in. Like fish do have a mood. And there's times you see like they're what is it? I think Gary calls it top water. Is when they're trying to take something off the surface, and then later on there's times where they're deep feeding. So it depends on temperature, atmospheric conditions, I believe, time of day, weather. Sure, when it rains, probably not eating a lot off top of the water because the surface is too disturbed. It's hard for them to see anything. I find that twilight, the fish just tend to really come out on those early hours. So I remember many a day at my cabin, just as the sun was setting and we were out there at the campfire, and all of a sudden you look out and the water's just alive with fish. That is the time to do it. But yeah, it doesn't take a lot. You don't have to, fish will take to a lot of stuff. Just experiment, play around. There's no wrong way to fish, except by not fishing.
So, one last quick comment here. Red Bear, beer can tab can also be used as a hook, and it absolutely can.
Yeah.
And actually, I have one here, not cut into a hook, but just a tab. It really doesn't take a whole lot of modification to turn that into a hook. You basically just take your loop
Yep.
up at the top, cut out the bottom part, sharpen this point down here into a triangle, and you got yourself a hook. I'm not saying you can't, but I am going to make the point, or I'm going to make the argument, a couple of store-bought hooks thrown in a small bag, pretty hard to beat them. You know what I mean? I'm not against trying this. By all means, try it. Great thing to try, great skill to learn. But you can't just
But
beat a
both
good
me
quality
and
hook.
like you can spend a fortune on gear. You really can, because we have. And I haven't spent nearly what other people have spent. But
I haven't spent what I wanted to spend.
Here's a nice little kit that they're already the hooks are already in them. Yeah, quick trip down to the dollar store, buy a bunch of hooks. You can get yourself a really solid start that way. Also, I'm just going to throw this out there for anyone who's listening. You don't have to spend a fortune on them. Amazon, Temu, a lot of that stuff is perfectly great, and you can buy some pretty bulky stuff. It wouldn't take long to get yourself equipped. The bigger box stores, you can spend 5, 10, 15, 20 bucks on a lure. For me, that's a donation to the river, because I've lost more hooks and lures than I care to remember. So I don't like it hurts me to put the expensive one on. So yeah,
I don't have
do
the
what
best luck with those big lures, to be honest with you. Like, I'm never fishing fish that big.
yeah, you do you. But yeah, fishing is an absolute blast. If you're into fishing, you know what I'm talking about. If you're not into fishing, you haven't caught a fish in the right time. Because if you catch a fish and
My
you go through
daughter,
that fight,
she only started fishing last year, and she's hooked every single night I come home. Dad, can we go fishing? Did you eat
yeah,
the fish in the fridge? No? Then you can't go fishing. Like, this is the cycle we're getting into. You know what I mean?
yeah. But no, it's a lot of fun. We both enjoy it. But yeah, it's like we said, this is something you can definitely grab a pretty cheap rod and reel and get out and enjoy yourself. Make sure you're following the local laws. It really sucks to get pulled over by a police officer or game warden and have them check for your license and you not have it on you. And the fine, I think, is generally quite a bit more than the license would have cost you. So do that, and also look up your local rules and regulations. Nova Scotia was a really good example of this. Some rivers you can fish, but not between certain points. Like above a bridge and below a bridge is sometimes completely different. Certain bodies of water you can fish certain types of fish. Others you have to catch and release.
A prime example of that, just to throw an example out there, down in Marigamish, where I'm originally from, there's a bridge. This side of the bridge, it's considered inland water. You need a license. You have to start at the later date. This side of the bridge, open water. No license required. No real regulations on when you can fish. And the dance has always been, where's the crossover underneath? So what happens if you're standing on this side of the bridge and cast under it into... Oh, man, the things we used to try and talk to the conservation officers down there. But anyway, that's one of those gray areas, you know what I mean? It was only defined as the north side, south side of a bridge. I mean, know your laws. That's all I can say.
Yeah, so that's the important thing. But yeah, it doesn't take a lot. Like I said, because we promised to define your kit. A handful of small hooks. You can catch almost anything with a small hook with patience. A couple of leads to protect your line from more aggressive fish. A few feet of probably heavy gauge line, and probably no more than 50 feet of light gauge. 10, 12, 15 pound is more than adequate enough. And some way to secure all that so it doesn't get tangled up. So as long as it's secured on something, and to throw on that maybe a couple of types of bait and spinners, just because it's good to have some options.
And the last luxury item I'd throw in there, and I am calling it a luxury item because you don't really need it, but it does help. If you can get a couple weights in there. Well, a
Oh, yeah,
bobber and
weights.
just a couple little weights, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Once
So
you put a spinner on, a steel lead, or any kind of lead and some bait, that's going to give you a little bit of weight to get out there. But even with a $100 rod and reel, it's only going to go so far. You're not going to outcast the cane in this instance, you know what I mean? So if you do want to get a little bit more distance, even one of those crimp-on weights, I always called them the squeeze-on weights, and I know people are going to hate me when I say this, but those little lead snip-on weights, they are truly soft enough. You can kind of pinch them on with your fingers or tap them on between two rocks, and they're going to work. I know they're
I
meant for
am going to want to
pliers,
throw
but
one more thing on there, just because I think it is important. So in my fishing kit, I hadn't found this is where I left one of my favorite Swiss Army knives. I have a pair of pliers in there, and a pair of pliers to get some of the hooks out, or to just crimp down your weights.
see, I usually carry my
Absolutely.
multi-tool, so I know I'm going to have a multi-tool and pliers on me. But if you
So
don't, it is a good idea. A pair of nail clippers is also a great thing for snipping off little ends of line and stuff like that. But now we're talking about the niceties you can add in if you have the room and you want to beef up your kit.
anywho, yeah. So that's sort of the thing. Fishing rod, a reel's probably not required. If you get a chance to pick up one of those 10 caras, let us know what you think about it. I'm definitely tempted.
I was going to say,
Uh,
I bet you Ben will have one by the end of next month for sure.
I got to go though. So yeah, get out there, have fun. We'll talk to you next week.
See you, folks. Have a good night.